What's up, guys? Steel Frodo here. Welcome back to another episode of Fairy Tail. This is the first only review episode that I'm going to do, and it's going to continue on from here, but anybody who even casually follows the channel knows why it's going to be exclusively reviews from here on out, but we're not going to get into that. We're going to get into the episode, so let's get started. So I'm going to kind of skip over the breakdown part for the start because we kind of already know what happened. I just want to get straight into the review with this because Urza, of course, broke up the fight between Gray and Natsu, and that fight was very not satisfying to begin with because it goes against everything that we've been kind of trained to accept with this series from day one. Friendship, fighting between one another is sort of a funny thing in this series, even though in this it was very emotionally driven, very harsh, very angry, and it made the viewer, myself or whoever's watching, feel very uncomfortable because it completely detaches itself from the rest of the series and the rest of the entire show because of the fact that it just doesn't feel like anything we should be seeing in a series that has spent its entire existence talking about how friendship is the most important thing to these characters. And I'll rag on series all the time for the power of friendship saves everything and blah, blah, blah. But in this case, it's actually used beneficially as a plot point. It brings Natsu back from his Zeref demon mode, and it brings Gray back from the madness of using the Ice Demon Slayer magic. So it actually, in this instance, carries over and makes sense to the viewer and makes sense for the story because we have had an entire 9 years of this show to establish this moment of friendship being important. And it's brought to us by Urza, but through the voice of Makarov, because as we have been taught and as we have been accustomed to the mannerisms and the way that this show, portrays friendship, we get that same thing through Makarov and through Urza because they are very similar in their characteristics of leadership and family, and it works so well to bring us not just the viewers but also Natsu and Gray back from that moment. And it's even more fitting because in this same moment we are not only emotionally impacted by the fact that Urza is crying and the fact that Urza is now leading and bringing them back from this moment, but it's also impactful because we are still very kind of hung up on the fact that Makarov has died, and we get one final message from him through Urza because his teachings have imprinted on Urza so thoroughly, so deeply, that her saying it is the equivalent of this long-standing character of the series saying it himself. And in fact, on the note of Urza crying, we actually get a cut back, like all the way back to the Tower of Heaven arc with Natsu fighting Jalal, which was such a cool just moment to see because it was not, I was looking and I could have sworn that they would have reanimated it. I would have thought that that they would have taken and animated that scene again, but no, it's literally from the previous animation style, or at least if it was from the previous animation style, or if it wasn't from the previous animation style, they did a damn good job of emulating it, because it certainly looked like it was from the previous animation style. Maybe I'm wrong, somebody let me know in the comments. But this is why I am all on board with Urza being the master of the guild again, because her love for her friends, her friendship, her kindness, and her strength and her leadership all make her a perfect candidate for leading the guild. I think that scene perfectly encompasses it, and I'm not even going to bother to break down the scene because it's literally fight ends, Urza cries, big emotional speech from Urza / Makarov, showing the similarities, showing the fact that all of Makarov's teachings have actually had an impact on every character that he has come in contact with in the entire series. And it's at this point, of course, that we sort of have a break from all the emotion with Gray and Juvia reuniting and both passing out because they've both overworked themselves. We have Natsu turning off his demon hands and falling back and ending up in the arms of Lucy, having Happy come up and give him a hug and ruin the emotional moment between he and Lucy. But then Natsu passes out because, keep in mind, whatever the thing that was in him that got reversed is still very heavily affecting him, but at this point, because it's not directed into him being a demon, it's now sort of just there weakening his strength. So after that brilliant moment of storytelling and composing everything that we know about this series into one perfect, well-encapsulated moment that helps bring these characters back, we then get the other side of the coin, the good and evil. Is it really black and white? And we get this with Crime Sorcière, which is a perfect example of a group that was basically formed from the idea of good and evil are not black and white. And we have them being handily defeated and lectured by August. And he's lecturing them about the black and white is not truly good and evil and blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, he's demonstrating the fact that he knows all of the magic abilities that these incredibly talented wizards have. And he harnesses all of them. He's faster. He can hear their movements. He's mastered a very interesting skill. It's incredible that he has the ability of just handling all these spells perfectly, and showing off this power in an instance where he defeats all of Crime Sorcière is incredibly well done and just really impressive to see. I mean, not so much visually as it is just seeing the composition of the characters fighting one another and August demonstrating his power. But I could nerd out about that. I'm done. I'm not going to nerd out about that too much. And then we get another very tense moment, and I'm placing my bets on one or the other. We have Urza meeting up with Irene, and I'm so confused. I'm very much so guessing that it's a mother-daughter relationship, and I want to know how. But the phrasing, the way that Irene keeps saying, "I am you and you are me," I'm thinking, is this actually a mother-daughter thing? Is it a time travel thing? Because she has enchantment abilities. God knows what that would mean for the ability to enchant herself. I don't know. So I'm thinking it's a mother-daughter relationship thing, because we've already messed around with time travel quite a bit when it comes to things like the not Grand Magic Games arc, the one with the gate, and I forget what it is because I've been watching this series so long that everything just melds together at a certain point. But either way, I feel like that is probably not going to be the case. I feel like we're probably looking more at a mother-daughter relationship thing. But that really kind of sets up what I'm thinking is probably going to be quite an incredible fight. And I can't wait to see it, because Irene is just stupid powerful, and she's stupid powerful without even having to wield a sword or really lift a finger. So I'm curious to see this enchantment and magic from a distance kind of technique that Irene uses versus hand-to-hand, brute strength, and cunning ability and fighting style that Urza uses. But before anything really picks up with that, other than a couple of exchanged lines and a lead up to what I'm hoping will be a great fight, we then kind of get the wrap-up of, well, Sabretooth fighting other of the 12, the ones who are already dead, and defeating them, which I'm thinking, people were saying that, there's no way they would have defeated them because they are, way more powerful and blah, blah, blah. But remember, these guys are weakened because they're only as strong as Nineheart, which Nineheart was handily, brutally defeated by Natsu. So I'm wondering if by Nineheart being defeated, he was they either vanished on their own. And we actually have Minerva saying, I don't know if we beat them or if the caster was defeated, but it was a well fought battle. So that is something. Then we have what gets into, of course, I always hate on the fact that this show has fan service. I make fun of it because it's fun to make fun of. But this next moment with the introduction of Larcade and his abilities actually kind of shows a good use of fan service, but it also kind of tells a story where you can kind of mentally piece together what or who his magic affects. Essentially, he casts a spell that affects quite a number of members of Fairy Tail, but also affects other people, including his allies, the members of the Spriggan 12, including Zeref himself. And this is interesting because it's actually quite a big reveal for quite a lot of characters. And I'm going to kind of break down, this is the breakdown part, I'm going to kind of break down how visually and mentally this one kind of small moment really defines different characters and sort of their maturity, their what they've been through, what they've done, and how the writers expect the viewers to piece this together themselves. So let's talk about that. So his whole thing is pain and pleasure, and he casts this spell, and the first thing we see is, well, immediately in front of him, one of the people he's facing falls. Then we start seeing other members of Fairy Tail start to succumb to this. We see members of Sabretooth succumb to this, which I think Rogue had probably the best reaction to this spell. So that was kind of funny to see.
Well, this isn't good.
We see several people getting affected by this. We have Loxus, we have Gildarts, we've got, well, like I said before, Rogue and Minerva affected by this. We have so many different characters affected by this, including the members of the Spriggan 12, including Zareth, and we also have Irene affected by this. And at this point, as everybody's falling, we have Mavis kind of looking around trying to figure out what this magic does, because she thinks only the adults are affected, but in reality, not every adult is affected. And before she can piece together what's going on, she herself is affected, which confuses me a little, because when it kind of cuts to Gildarts, I was able to piece together that it's essentially everybody who's still a virgin. They were the ones who were not affected, and everybody else who has experienced forbidden pleasure, I think is what they called it in the manga, or who has experienced the taste of pleasure, is affected by this spell. Now, I pieced it together with Gildarts because, as we know, Gildarts is a womanizer, but it's a huge reveal because Loxus, we've got Rogue, we've got Minerva, we've got, I forget her name from Crime Sorcière, who's oh God, I can't remember her name now. Sorno is affected, and it's bizarre because that means that they've all done it. Essentially, what this spell did for the viewer is figured out which characters in Fairy Tail got laid and which ones were virgin nerds. So yeah, kind of an interesting little reveal here, but I'm curious about why Mavis was affected, but I'm sure we'll get into that at some point. But that's what the spell was, and Zareth asks Larkade to stop because he was actually affected, and of course it affected members of the Spriggan 12. So he attacked essentially his own men. And like I said, this is a moment where fan service, it's fan service. I still, as I've said, you know how I feel about fan service, but in that instance, it actually served to tell a component of the story, and it worked very well. And it worked because it basically showed the viewer visually what was going on without having to tell. Showing without telling is a great way to tell the story because you end up as the viewer feeling more engaged overall. Now, the part that I was kind of not okay with is the fact that for people who were not affected by it because they have not tasted forbidden pleasure, blah, 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 that's going to be a hard word to continue saying. For those who were not affected, he has a spell for that, and where I do take issue is the fact that the way that he can inflict that is via tentacles. I guess, it is Japanese, but, Anywho, at this point, Kagura shows up. She cuts through all of the tentacle thingies and frees up her allies and begins to fight. And because of this, she fights Larkade. Let me compose my thoughts here for a minute. She begins to fight Larkade, and he is incredibly strong because she's fighting his strikes via light. And while blocking the light attacks, he's clearly not really doing much other than casting spells. So she cuts down the rock that he's sitting on, and he uses this as an opportunity to attack, and we see how powerful he truly is. Kagura uses her arch enemy attack, which she's used before, and it is extraordinarily powerful, and he blocks it with his bare hands and continues to block her attacks non-stop to the point where she was clever. She was able to avoid his pleasure attack by inflicting her own pain to escape it. But at the end of the day, he was powerful enough that even without using his own magic ability, he was able to take her down with a simple cut to the side. And as we see red wine, because it's like purple for some reason, spill across the ground, that's it for Kagura. And then he continues to go after everyone else. And yeah, it's a vulgar spell, as Kagura said, and I agree. But it's leading up to what I'm hoping will be a very interesting fight, because we have two options here with who could fight Larcade. Now, August says that the only way to defeat Larcade is via his mother, which we'll get to in a minute because that was a big reveal. But in terms of people who can stand up against Larcade, my guess is either Rogue, because he is darkness. His ability revolves around shadows. I'm thinking he can stand a chance because he's facing against somebody who is light. But he's affected by the pleasure spell, so I don't think he's really up for the task at the moment, considering he's laying on the ground smiling. The other person could be Sting. And I say that because we don't see Sting affected by it. In fact, we don't see Sting at all. And that would be light versus light. So whose light would be more powerful? That is what I'm more interested in. Now, after we see this final moment with Larcade fighting, and my guess is of who's going to fight against him and possibly stand a chance, August says the only person who might be able to defeat him is his mother, and it cuts to Mavis. So we already know that Larcade is the son of Zeref. Larcade Dragneel, Zeref is his father, Zeref Dragneel, which means that we have Natsu, his Uncle Natsu, for Larcade, and Larcade wants to kill him because Zeref cares more about Natsu than he cares about Larcade. But my concern, question, whatever, is how is Larcade the son of Mavis? It kind of makes sense, and I don't want to think about it too much because I would get ooked out, but Zeref was affected by Larcade's spell. Mavis was affected by Larcade's spell. So does that mean that they... I don't want to think about it too much. We're going to move on from this. I don't want to... Next. Oh, shoot, there is nothing next. That's the end of the episode. Oh, boy. So, yeah, we've got a lot to digest from this episode, and I'm looking forward to the next episode because there's a lot to cover and a lot to digest. So, I'm curious who's going to face off against Larcade before I guess we see him go up with Mavis. I don't know. I mean, yeah, boy, this was quite the episode. I did like this episode because it used a lot of tropes that would normally be seen as bad. Things like the fan service, things like the friendship defeats all things, and friendship will triumph over all. It used all of those things to its benefit. It actually used what we already knew about the way that the characters should act, the way that this show has mentally ingrained in us that friendship is something that these characters hold very dear. And it used that to tell a story without pushing it into our faces. It used that to actually compose an emotional moment that made sense and was within character and brought characters who were acting out of character back into their own character and the way we expect them to act. It was really well done. And the fan service was a perfect way of letting the viewer piece together in their own minds what kind of magic Larcade was using without actually just handing it to us on a silver plate. It actually let us sort of piece it together before they kind of hinted or told us in a way what it was. It was a really well-written episode. And that's really all I have to say about this episode. It was well-written. I'm excited to see what happens next because there's still a lot of lead-up, which means that if Larcade released the spell that he was casting only on the Spriggan 12, that means that at this point, well, Irene's probably back to fighting ability, which means she's going to face off against Urza. We have Natsu still incapacitated. I'm pretty sure Gray and Juvia are just kind of out for the count because of how much they've been working and overworking themselves. So I'm not super concerned about them because they're probably just going to get healed. Natsu, I don't know what's going to happen. There's a lot of lead up and there's a lot of things that I'm looking forward to that's going to be just, whew, boy, I'm getting ready. And one last thing before I end here, we didn't see if Levi and Gagio were affected by this spell or how or if or whatever, so just throwing that out there. We don't know if they were affected or not. I'm going to say they were, and we weren't shown it because, well, that would be too obvious for the viewer. Anyway, my ship has sailed and I'm happy with that, but I want to know what you guys think. I'm trying to put a lot more thought and detail and depth into these reviews because not doing the reactions is probably one of the most freeing things for me because I can actually analyze an episode. I can break it down into smaller details and talk about one particular moment for way longer than the moment lasts because I don't have to sit through and try to quickly get my ideas out on a reaction format. I can actually break it down the way I want to. So I hope you guys are enjoying that. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Please don't leave any sort of, like, here's how you could do reactions again. Please don't. There's a company that I've already dealt with. They know that game. They're not going to let me play that game. I don't want to play that game. So just enjoy the reviews for what they are. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. And apart from that, I will see you guys in the next video. Make sure to like and subscribe. Hit that bell icon if you guys want to get notified every time a new video comes up. Once a day every week. I almost choked on my own spit there. Once a day every week. Let me know. And yeah, other than that, check out the links in the description. I do have merch you guys can check out. This isn't merch. This is a Tartaros Arc fairy tale shirt. But I do have merch if you guys want to check it out. There's, of course, the links down there. And otherwise, I'll see you guys in the next video. Make sure to be there and have a good one.